Hey up everyone, welcome back to the North. For today we are going to look at Northern's top 5 tips to the Darkest Dungeon so far in early access. Any gameplay footage used in this video is from our current playthrough that we're doing on the channel, so feel free to go and check that out. I'll leave a link in the description as well as I'll put a card up in the top right, just so you can click on it and get involved. Get involved, the more the merrier. Now, without further ado, let's get into the top 5 tips from Northern Soul. First top tip I learned the hard way. Focus on stress over healing your people. Stress has a massive knock-on effect to your characters, as anyone who has already played it will be able to tell you by a mile. In terms of healing, it takes a bit more of a backseat, get it, pun, to the road, as usually, as you go further on the road, you heal regardless as you go onwards, and you also can heal at the end. You can use other healing items is like 3 actions for the items that you've got. So you really want to focus down on your stress more than anything, because you've only got 10 little blocks of it this time instead of 100 like the first one. And after you get over 4 stress, all the negative relationship actions start popping off, and it builds and builds and builds and builds until it explodes. So best course of action, always take a Plague Doctor, and with the first mastery point in the inn, make sure you upgrade Ounce Prevention. It's one of the starting skills you get with the Plague Doctor, and not only does it give you resist to every damage over time ability from the enemies, but it'll also give you a stress buffer. It'll reduce the stress for every time you use it, so it is like paramount that you keep it. Bird Girl is the saviour of Darkest Dungeon 2 so far. Tip number 2, smoke 'em while you got 'em, or use items that is in the stagecoach. Because at the end of the day, you're not taking them on the next run regardless. You've only got a certain amount of area in your stagecoach. You can't sell anything for extra currency or anything. You've just got to throw it away. And even throwing away some items from the stagecoach can actually give you more hope overall, which will level up your status level, so you unlock more stuff for the entire game. It's a win-win. And a lot of some of the items are a bit sort of like placeholdery for the time being. So it might get, in terms of like trinkets, some of them are very common and bare bonesy, whereas some of them are a bit rarer and better, but quite in general, like most of my inventory, I could probably just chuck it in the bloody sea, and I probably wouldn't see much of a difference. Get it? It's a pun. Keep up. Tip number 3, for the love of God, reduce the loathing, unless you're an absolute masochist. So loathing is something that shows up in the top left of your screen as you're going. It shows up as like these little skulls, and the more you don't deal with it, the higher it becomes, and the more abilities and like buffs the enemies get for every fight. So loathing will always increase every time you get to an inn at the end of each area of the world, or the road as it were, and to deal with it you've got to clear enemy combat challenges which are on your map, which you'll see as you scout it or you just find it as you go. So there's lairs, there's the cultist encounters which show up, we'll get onto that in a second, and also there's the resistance areas as well. With cultist encounters, not only will you find them down the line on a map as well, but if you let the light burn out to 0, which we have learned several times the hard way, cultists will come knocking at your door and come kick the ever-living crap out of you, unless you are pretty ready. So remember, lower that loathing. One of the best ways I've seen of doing it is whenever you get to the end of a map, there's always a final guardian. Now, there's always several rounds of the Guardian Challenge, you could call it, and if you get to the end of that, that significantly drops it, so that'll give you a better chance in the next map coming after the inn that you go into, because otherwise, you'll max it out to 5, and you're just going to have a bad time. Tip numero 4, do not let hope burn out, in which I mean, something I referenced to in the Loathing, is the torch. The torch is sort of a throwback to Darkest Dungeon 1, as many players from Darkest Dungeon 1 will recall. The torch was paramount to keeping your stress low and the battles a lot easier. The torch takes a bit of a different seat in this game, into which it's effectively your hope, and the higher hope you have, or torch, the higher chance of bust for you against the enemy. And one of the best ways of raising the torch, or hope, is doing the assistance encounters where you bump into fellow citizens of the world who really need a hand. And more often than not, you'll have like 3, maybe even 4 opinions from your heroes, and there's always one that will raise the bar, or torch you could say. So keep it high, keep it well remembered, because if it drops to 0, the cultists will come a knocking, and you don't want them coming knocking, especially in the early game when you've only got 1 or 2 mastery points. You're not going to have a good time. Or you might. Once again, if you're a masochist, or if you just really like to make games that much harder. And finally, number 5, make sure you progress the hero's stories. So whenever you see a Shrine of Reflection on the map, always go to it. I've always been trying to go to it as many times as possible on my playthrough so far, because not only does it give you unlocks for like more abilities for these characters that you choose, but it also gives a more of a backstory that you didn't get in the first Darkest Dungeon. You got a bit of it in the like comics and lore and background, which aren't part of the actual first game. But in terms of like character background for Darkest Dungeon 2, this is sort of like your way in. Each character has like 5 levels of story, and a lot of them are passive, and then some of them, like Mr. Buff Prison Dismas, is actually interactive and there's a fight involved. From what I gather, there's actually a fight in each one of them, but it's not always the first story part. But at the very least, you'll always get something from it, at the very least, an ability. For example, Point Blank Shot for Dismas was a good one, and Bellow for the Man-at-Arms. So make sure you're finding out about your friends and party, find out who you're sharing your coffin or carriage with, or you might just end up with a knife in the back, or a pickaxe to the head, or you could turn out to be angry lovers. Guess you'll find out one way or the other. And I know I said 5 tips, but for the 6th and final hidden tip at the end, please bear in mind that the game is in early access, and it's only been out for about 2 to 3 days tops. So yes, there are going to be some grading issues, there are going to be a few things here and there. Pretty sure the devs are fully aware of it. If anyone remembers Darkest Dungeon 1 at the very start of early access, it was a very different game to what it was in its final product, which we all now know and love. So give it a bit of time in the oven. We're all going to help it bake, to use the same analogy, and hopefully in about a year's time we should see closer to a final product. It's already pretty like fresh and swish, from my opinion, and don't get me wrong, I have a few little nagging issues with it, but the overarching game, the combat, the art design, Wayne June coming back, all that sort of stuff, top banana. I've never said top banana before. And if you do have any qualms with the game, feel free to write some feedback to them, especially if I have access to. I know that I'll be writing some feedback to them, and if you don't have access to writing feedback, feel free to have the discussion about the game in the comments down below. Let's have a chat about it. Let's see what we think is great. Let's see what they think we can improve upon. I think that'd be a great time in the comments, so feel free to check that out. That's it for now. Might do another video down the line after I've played a few more hours into this very gritty, world-ending, Blues Brothers gone wrong road trip. Are we on a mission from God? I don't know. We are on a mission to minimize stress as much as physically possible. As always, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, feel free to subscribe to the channel now. Make sure you hit that notification bell if you do, so you always get notifications for the next episodes of series to come, including Darkest Dungeon 2, which is live right now. We've got a few episodes going, and I don't plan on stopping, so feel free to tune in at any point. I'm still looking for some hero names, I'm still looking to name the Wainwright whatever people want, so I'm all in for it. Ciao for now!